You delved through the caves of chaos, slew the goblins of Dimrak Forest, and rescued the Princess of Haven. You fought pirates and dinosaurs, defeated the desert nomads, and explored the coral city of Suthus. You claimed land in the far north, fought armies of undead, and travelled to the strange world of Alos. You are one of the most powerful people alive, a paragon of adventuring spirit. You have cultivated a legacy, but it is your future that concerns you most. You have earned the attention of the immortals, and a seat among them awaits you. Hi, I'm BECMI Berserker, and welcome back to my channel. It's time to dive into the Master Rules, the fourth box set of the BECMI Dungeons and Dragons series, which in my opinion was the most comprehensive edition of D&D ever published. The Master Rules was the fourth box set out of 5 that made up the BECMI edition, commonly referred to as the Black Box. It was adorned by yet another Elmore dragon, this time gold, and ridden by a character wearing a crown, clearly a ruler of some kind. It inspired visions of what was possible after the dominion building potential of the previous companion set. Worm-riding lords marshalling their lands and flying to battle. How many of you pictured your own characters in this one's place? The Master Rules was published in 1985, written by Frank Mentzer. It consisted of rules supporting play for the final mortal levels of a Dungeons and Dragons character, levels 26 to 36. The box set continued the tradition of containing 2 separate books, one for the players and one for the Dungeon Master. In addition to the Master Rules introducing new gameplay elements, there was also an attempt to clarify rules in respect of certain effects or certain situations, such as Dispel Magic or Dominion Income. So what else was there to do in the game? What was there to excite players and make them continue wanting to play this game to umpteenth level? Well, in short, I think it was the promise. The promise of what might be around the corner, with a comprehensive weapon mastery system that gave characters special offensive and defensive capabilities, a pathway to immortality and godlike powers, and potential to access mysterious, powerful and extremely dangerous artifacts. With the Master Rules, the BECMI edition just kept giving. As mentioned earlier, the Master Rules was adorned by yet another Elmore dragon. I think the only way they'll get me playing 6th edition would be to have a creature called an Elmore dragon. Anyway, the box set contained 2 books, a 32-page Master Player's book and a 64-page Master DM's book. So let's take a look inside. The Master Player's book, this is my rather battered copy, sets the tone in the first page, making early reference to the potential to become immortal, making it clear this is an option. What follows are 11 pages of additional character class information, before we are introduced to the rules for Weapon Mastery. What we are informed of immediately is that Weapon Mastery is not a system only available to Master level characters. It is a retroactive optional system to be made available to players from level 1 if required. What this means is that, through an adventurer's life, they may learn different levels of mastery of their weapons. But how did that work? And what about my poor 26th level fighter who's only just realised he could have weapon mastery on opening this box? Let's address the issue of the existing high level character first. Clearly characters will have had favourite weapons as they progressed in power. Therefore there's no real science to this. It's all about working with the DM and agreeing what your level of weapon mastery might have been if you started at first level. In my experience, these conversations were always reasonable, and so players were integrated into the weapon mastery system like they'd always been. So let's have a look at it. The first thing I would say about weapon mastery is that it wasn't limited to just fighters. Anyone could obtain mastery of a weapon. In fact, a paragraph within the weapon mastery section expands the weapon options of a magic user, from just a dagger to include a blowgun, net, whip and staff. The limiting factor became time, as time spent by spellcasters on mastering weapons could be spent on magical research instead. So there was a bit of a trade-off here if a magic user was looking to become a jack of all trades. So how did weapon mastery work if starting from level 1? Well, each human class starts with limited knowledge, called basic knowledge, of 2 weapons, except for the fighter, who starts with a basic knowledge of 4. Demi-humans start with basic knowledge in all weapons due to having lived a longer life before adventuring. Having less than basic knowledge of a weapon was called unskilled, which resulted in penalties being applied to damage as well as to hit rolls for missile weapons. Knowledge of one additional weapon may be gained at each of the levels shown in this table, with additional knowledge possible for every 200,000 experience points beyond maximum level. Knowledge is not automatic, as a character must be trained in a new weapon. Alternatively, instead of learning a new weapon, a character may opt to gain a level of mastery in one of their weapons that they already know about. Weapon Mastery has 5 levels. These are Basic, Skilled, Expert, Master, and Grandmaster. Again, this requires training, but by a trainer with mastery of the weapon type desired, at least one level beyond the character's own. The availability of a trainer will of course be dependent on your campaign. So if you happen to level up in the frozen tundra of Norwald, you are unlikely to find a passing swordmaster willing to spend a few weeks in minus temperatures to avail you of her wondrous swordplay. It's more likely you will have to wait until you reach a civilized town of some population to be confident that the skill that you're looking for resides there. And then you still have to find them. Cue side trek. In addition to securing a trainer with the right level of ability is the expense. This table shows the time required to attain each level of weapon mastery based on current knowledge. So a character rated as skilled would need to train for 4 weeks to become an expert, at a cost of 500 gold pieces a week. This is 4 weeks of game time with no breaks. It all seems quite simple and easy, doesn't it? Well, that's just old school D&D lulling you into a false sense of security. Training success is far from guaranteed. This table demonstrates the chance of your training being successful, with the check being made halfway through the training period and the result immediately known, giving the character the option to continue training or not. If they continue, then any future attempt at the same training has a 10% bonus. If they stop their training, then they recoup half the training costs and gain no further effect. So taking the example of the skilled character I mentioned earlier, after spending 2,000 gold pieces on 4 weeks of training, they would need to roll 40 or lower on a D percentile to obtain expert level. If successful, they gain the benefits immediately. If unsuccessful, they know the result after 2 weeks. The character then has the option to continue and therefore make their future attempt 10% easier, but still at a cost of 2,000 gold pieces, or they can stop after 2 weeks after just spending 1,000 gold pieces and gain no bonus to future checks. In my opinion, this is a clever game of chance inserted into the system that allows a character to gamble, if you will, on the possibility of gaining levels of weapon mastery. With only an initial 8 attempts available to 36 level characters, or 11 to 36 level fighters, to become Grandmaster can be incredibly difficult. It also guarantees that not all characters will have the same level of ability in their weapons, even at the same character level. It was the kind of combat expertise variety that the game was missing, and it didn't appear in any other system apart from BECMI. But hang on, I haven't shown you what the effect of weapon mastery is yet. The weapon mastery mechanic allowed for greater variety in terms of what could be done with a weapon by a skilled character, which considered the versatility of the weapons themselves, that being linked to the design purpose of each weapon. For example, a sword may offer a bonus to disarm an opponent, whereas a hammer may stun them. This meant that your weapon choice also had meaning, in that your weapon's design had a purpose beyond just dealing damage. In addition, the extent of your bonus due to weapon mastery was linked to whether your weapon was designed to deal with how your opponent is armed. For example, your weapon may have more effect against an enemy fighting you with handheld weapons, rather than a monster using natural attacks. The benefits of weapon mastery were communicated on a 2-page spread of the Master Player's Book, which conveyed bonuses to attack and defense, as well as special weapon abilities. Here's a quick glimpse at it. And yes, it was difficult to read even for a 14-year-old with 20/20 vision. Let's have a look at 2 different entries to demonstrate the benefits weapon mastery conveyed. First, let's look at a normal sword. Yes, you heard that correctly. an average one-handed sword was called a normal sword. Now, before anyone has an issue with the terminology, I would recommend you research the merits of the term longsword also. In actuality, in the past there's been lots of different swords that have recently been bundled together as the long sword. So the average sword here in BECMI is referred to here as a normal, everyday, average Joe swinging sword. So that's that out of the way. As you can see here, there is lots of information which I've labelled on this slide. Please take your time to look at it if you wish to pause the video. But clearly you'll see that the greater your skill with the sword, the greater your damage output and your potential armor class bonuses. So a skilled wielder of a normal sword can do 1d12 damage per successful attack, as opposed to the normal 1d8, and also gain a -2 bonus to armor class versus 1 attack per round, if that combatant is using a handheld weapon. So if fighting a ghoul that has 3 attacks per round, the armor class bonus is only gained for 1 of those attacks. Oh, and to quickly note, BECMI and the other old-school pre-3rd edition D&D games used descending armor class, hence -2 being a bonus. We can also see here that the skilled swordsman has gained an ability to deflect blows or disarm an opponent. If we look at the Grand Master, we can see that mastery of the weapon allows for it to be thrown, as we are shown its ranges. Its primary damage, that is against handheld opponents, is 2d6 plus 8, whilst its secondary damage, such as when it's thrown, is 2d4 plus 8. A -4 AC bonus is gained against 3 attacks per round, and the deflect and disarm abilities become stronger and more effective. Therefore, the potential damage output of a character is a maximum of 20 per successful hit before strength, magical and extra damage bonuses are added. That's 12 more than a basic level of mastery. Let's have a look at a longbow now. Here you can see that for a skilled archer, their damage becomes 1d8 plus 1. They also gain a -1 to armor class against 1 handheld attack per round. In addition, an enemy hit at short or medium range may be delayed, which affects their initiative order. A Grand Master archer can use their longbow at greater range, does 4d4 plus 2 damage versus missile opponents, and 1d10 plus 6 damage against other opponents, whilst getting a -2 bonus to AC against 2 handheld attacks per round. The delay ability remains unchanged. This equates to a maximum damage potential of 18 per successful hit without other bonuses. Again, 12 more than a basic level of mastery. As you can see from just these 2 examples, the weapon mastery system completely changed the potential effectiveness of physical combat encounters, and not just through the damage output. The extra weapon abilities made for different effects on the battlefield, which led to interesting outcomes. You can almost see how this could have led to feat development in later editions, with characters getting better at using certain weapons as they leveled. The main difference with BECMI, apart from the mechanic obviously, is that obtaining mastery was subject to a successful training check, rather than being an automatically obtained improvement. So you could have characters who had succeeded at all their weapon mastery training checks, and you could have characters that had succeeded at none. I should state that not everyone liked the weapon mastery system. Some thought it added a layer of complication that wasn't required. You could probably align it to how some people view feats today. However, I would have to say that the random element inserted through the training process was a good way of grounding the mechanics somewhat, ensuring that just because you've reached the level to attempt weapon mastery doesn't mean you'll be successful, making for a more diverse bag of what several characters at the same level are capable of. Well, that was weapon mastery, and we're still in the Master Player's book, the remaining 10 pages of which are devoted to what's called the Siege Machine. I'll not go into too much detail about that here, but essentially the Siege Machine was just an additional element of the War Machine published in the Companion Rules, which I speak about in a separate video. The link is on the screen. Essentially, the Siege Machine offers rules for when attacking strongholds and using certain types of equipment, including costs, etc. It's the missing element of the War Machine that rounds off the mass combat mechanic, and it's a fun read if you do as you're told and get yourself this game. Anyway, let's move over to the Master DM's book. As stated earlier, the book contains some clarifications to the application of rules that had been mentioned in the previous 3 box sets. These would all be brought together in a cohesive way in the future Rules Cyclopedia in 1991, but for now these clarifications were a good addition. But let's not dwell on them, let's get to the main event in this book, and that's the information on immortals. Specifically, the rules for how characters may attain immortality. First though, we need to cover off the concept of immortals in BECMI. If you've been watching my series on BECMI, you'll notice that I've not once mentioned gods or deities, or if I have, it was a slip of the tongue. BECMI sidesteps the issue of religion by stating that clerics gain their spells and powers based on their beliefs, not through a religion and not through a god. It leaves it to the players how best to explain this, allowing them to make their own minds up when it comes to whether they want religion and gods in their game. However, BECMI does offer an alternative to having a pantheon of gods, and that is through the existence of immortals. The Master DM's book introduces them as beings that manipulate the world, perhaps the entire multiverse, according to their own unknown goals. Once mortal themselves, these heroes of legend serve the advancing of the multiverse, gaining powers and responsibilities beyond the realm of the living as their reward. Now immortals, they subtly manipulate the events of the multiverse to advance their powers. Basically, the immortals were once normal people. They adventured just like your characters might adventure, and when they attained the height of their powers, they transcended into immortality. Right there, we are introduced to the possibility that our own characters might achieve the same and be an immortal character with magnificent powers. But it's not as simple as a DM just letting you know you're now immortal. There's far more to it than that. Becoming immortal is a significant investment in the campaign by both players and the DM. Much game time will pass if the characters remain alive. Some players won't bother with it, as I have to admit it can seem like overkill, even to me. However, the point is that the system is there to be used if required. We're talking about a time when content wasn't so focused on what was required by mainstream consumption, which meant that it could be allowed to grow great ideas with little challenge from shareholder overseers. In the rules, we are told that the multiverse is made up of 5 spheres of power: matter, energy, time, thought, and entropy. We are told that the first 4 spheres are related to the elements of earth, fire, water, and air respectively, whilst entropy is not linked to any element, its purpose being destruction. Entropy seeks to destroy matter, dissipate energy, cause time to stagnate, and stop new thought. The overall goal of the multiverse is to keep the balance between the spheres, and this is achieved through the acts of the immortals. In order for a human character to begin their quest for immortality, they must be at least 30th level, or a demi-human must have at least 1 million experience points, well below that of a human at 30th level. The text states that the path to immortality is not common knowledge, and must be researched. This encourages the DM to develop a quest most appropriate to their campaign and the character's background. What follows is information that supports the DM to create a backdrop to an epic adventure to gain an immortal's attention, so as to be found worthy enough to be set a quest to sit among their ranks. The DM is encouraged to make the communication with the immortal difficult to obtain, but typically the character must travel to a far-off and inhospitable region that smacks of 80s epic fantasy. An example of an immense mountain is used in the book. The character must have in mind the sphere of power the immortal is aligned with, so that the correct path to immortality may be set once an immortal agrees to support the character's petition. There are in total 4 paths to immortality, and they are not easy. In addition, the rules state a specific amount of time to be spent on each quest, which is not insignificant. Each path relates to either of the spheres of matter, energy, time, and thought. According to the rules as written, player characters may not become immortals of the sphere of entropy, but of course it's up to individual DMs. The 4 paths are named Dynast, relating to time and favouring the cleric class; Epic Hero, relating to thought and favouring the thief class; Paragon, relating to energy and favouring the magic user class; and Polymath, relating to matter and favouring the fighter class. Through some quirk or omission, there does not appear to be reference to a sphere that favours a demi-human, but all that is meant by favouring is that less experience points are needed to complete the quest by the favoured class. Each path is made up of a quest, trial, testimony, and task. These are immensely difficult projects, which are balanced by the amount of time and/or effort they require to complete, shown here. Please pause the video to read these further, but essentially these tasks are a huge undertaking for players and DMs alike, although I can imagine it would be a lot of fun. So what happens when the path is complete? What happens when you've done everything to attain the immortality promised? Well, bizarrely, the rules in the Master DM's book tell you that you must now retire your character. I know, right? You just went through all that to retire your character. There is the small passing gesture of you being able to return to the prime plane as any class of any level whenever you want, so just basically being able to play what you want. But it does seem to be a bit of an empty gesture after so much questing for immortality. But luckily, there was only 1 year to wait for the Immortals box set to support immortal play. So don't worry, all that effort wasn't for nothing. There's a multiverse to explore, and I'll be covering those rules in a future video. For now though, it's time to leave immortality behind and continue our journey through the Master DM's book. The next significant entry is our introduction to the Mystic class, a kind of human monk that specializes in unarmed combat based on one of the 4 fighting styles: offensive, defensive, wrestling, and throwing. This becomes important when fighting other mystics, as some styles are dominant over others. It should be noted that player character mystics are restricted to 16th level, the only human class to be restricted below 36th level. This is mainly due to the powerful abilities they gain as they progress. As you can see here, mystics can be immensely powerful, and proved quite popular, obviously, when introduced to the BECMI game. So after another 21 pages of new monsters, such as the Archon and the Phoenix, we are introduced to the final chapter, Artifacts, described as the greatest and most powerful of all magical items, specifically because they have been created by the Immortals and contain a portion of their power. That reminds me of a book I read. Artifacts are extremely rare and are treated as if they are 40th level, if a level is required in the game. They each have a rating of magnitude, either being minor, lesser, greater, or major, based on how much power an Immortal has invested in it. All artifacts have some rudimentary intelligence, and any use of an artifact by a mortal may cause adverse effects. Numerous known artifacts are presented in the rules, but the most enjoyable aspect of this chapter is the opportunity to create artifacts of your own, specific to your campaign. The text outlines in detail how to do this, but essentially any item can act as a vessel for an artifact. Artifact powers can consist of magical attacks, buffs to character abilities and movement, effects on the environment, and defense capabilities. All of these come at a cost of power points, which need to be tracked, but remember, mortals take their very existence into their own hands when using artifacts. Penalties can range from simple damage to aging a number of years, or even losing levels. A lot of fun can be had with artifacts, but players should go in with their eyes open. So let's have a look at a sample artifact to give you some idea of their power. This is the Shard of Sakrad. It is a 3-foot length of azure crystal. Its magnitude is rated as major. It has the following powers, although a major artifact can actually have up to 17, each costing a number of power points to use that recharge at a rate of 180 per hour, or 30 per turn, which is 10 minutes. All knowledge about how to use the crystal is only known if one remains in contact with it. Suggested handicaps due to using over 100 power points include magical error, loss of treasure, greed, which means causing those around the user to immediately want to possess the crystal, and doom, a 5% chance of an immortal arriving and forcing everyone around it to save versus death ray or die. And this is raised by 2% every time another 100 power points are used. Like I said, artifacts are powerful and dangerous. So that's artifacts. And with that, we close the book on the master rules and the black box. The options available to your characters now go well beyond the prime plane. You have climbed the mountain, gained the attention of an immortal, delivered on your promises, returned to the mountain and ascended into the heavens. It's time to join the Celestials, and we will meet them in the next video in this series, where I will take you through the Immortal rules, and introduce you to new mechanics used in playing an Immortal character. I hope you join me there. Otherwise, thank you for watching this video. Obviously, Weapon Mastery took most of it, but I feel it needed the attention to get people to understand it. I hope you found the information on Immortals and artifacts interesting also. Please like and subscribe if you found this interesting and you think I deserve your future attention. Your support means everything. I'm BECMI Berserker, and I hope to see you again soon.